Hello everyone. Today I will be analyzing and discussing the processes in which type 2 diabetes functions in the body. More specifically, I will be discussing how the Mediterranean diet can aid in managing type 2 diabetes, which leads into my research question. Does consuming a Mediterranean diet aid in managing type 2 diabetes? Diabetes is a chronic disease that affects the metabolism of carbohydrates and is the 8th leading cause of death in the U.S. and in the top 10 globally. It specifically affects glucose, resulting in higher than normal blood sugar levels. Glucose is a monosaccharide or a single sugar molecule that is the most abundant carbohydrate in the human body and is also the main fuel source for the body. When glucose enters the blood after digestion and absorption, pancreatic beta cells trigger insulin production. Insulin is a hormone that is produced in the pancreas that allows glucose to enter these cells to use for or transport energy throughout the body. In people with type 2 diabetes, glucose has trouble entering body cells for one of two reasons. The pancreas is not producing enough insulin to keep up with the rising blood glucose levels, or the cells become resistant to insulin when it is produced, also referred to as insulin resistance. In addition, this can affect glucagon stimulation and glycogen breakdown in the liver. Glycogen is the stored form of glucose, and glucagon is the hormone that activates glycogenolysis, which is the breakdown of glycogen into glucose. This occurs when blood glucose levels are low, and the body needs glucose for energy when food sources are not readily available yet. In normal regulation of blood glucose levels, once the body takes up enough energy from glucose, insulin will stimulate the liver to store glucose as glycogen. However, in insulin-resistant patients, insulin will not suppress the stimulation of glucagon to induce glycogenolysis. Instead, glucagon will stimulate both glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis. This is because insulin resistance essentially gaslights glucagon into thinking there is low blood sugar levels when hyperglycemia is already at risk. So how does diet play a role in this? Out of the many diets that have been suggested for managing blood glucose levels, the Mediterranean diet is widely renowned for its health benefits, especially for those with type 2 diabetes. First coined in 1960 by Ancel Keys, the Mediterranean diet is rooted from the lifestyle and culture that surrounds parts of the Mediterranean Sea, specifically Greece and southern Italy. It typically consists of plant foods like fruits and vegetables, potatoes, nuts and seeds, beans, honey a few times a week, a high intake of olive oil as the main source of fat, moderate consumption of cheese and yogurt. Fish and poultry are considered the animal protein of choice in low to moderate amounts, low intake of eggs, along with red meat no more than twice a month. Red wine is also considered in moderation, usually with meals. Based on the macronutrient composition of the Mediterranean diet, it is considered a plant-based diet, especially since most of the macronutrient sourcing is coming from plant foods. It is also considered a diet higher in omega-3 fatty acids and a good source of high fiber, which makes the Mediterranean diet one of the best diets to aid in managing type 2 diabetes. Now that we know what the Mediterranean diet consists of, how does the consumption of these foods affect type 2 diabetes management? An important aspect to talk about is that when monitoring blood glucose and insulin levels, there are two types of glycemic responses that occur. High glycemic responses induce rapid spikes in blood glucose levels after a meal, and low glycemic responses occur when blood glucose levels gradually raise after a meal. The difference between the two? It's all in what was eaten in the meal that allowed for these rapid spikes or gradual raises in blood glucose levels to occur. A recent study done on food preparation for managing glycemic responses discussed how each macronutrient affects the ways in which glucose is digested and absorbed to teach type 2 diabetic patients on how to prepare their meals strategically without having to cut out so many foods that are actually needed for diabetes management. One of the most popular assumptions when it comes to type 2 diabetes management is that patients have to cut down on carbohydrate intake. This is not the case. It's actually what kinds of carbohydrates they should be consuming is what's more important. As we can recall, consuming carbohydrates breaks down into glucose, which is energy for the body. Diabetic patients still need glucose for energy, so it comes down to controlling the rate at which glucose is being digested and absorbed, while still avoiding rapid glucose spikes. Fiber plays a major role in the management of blood glucose levels. Fiber is a plant source of carbohydrates that our bodies have a harder time digesting, making this the perfect carb for diabetics to consume. Food sources high in fiber in the Mediterranean diet include fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds, and whole grains. What is great about these fiber sources is that they can be mixed with more starchy carbohydrates like white rice, potatoes, and pasta, which are the culprit for high glycemic responses and blood glucose levels. By combining these two carbohydrates together, it allows for a slower digestion and absorption process, resulting in a low glycemic response. Fat and protein also play a role in managing blood glucose levels. Carbohydrates are digested and absorbed so quickly due to the process starting in the mouth. However, fat and protein digestion don't start until they reach the stomach before final digestion and absorption in the small intestine. The hormone CCK is responsible for inhibiting gastric emptying when fat begins the digestion process in the stomach. This halts carbohydrate digestion and absorption since the acidic nature of the stomach is too strong for the digestion process to continue. Also, during this process, proteins can interact with starchy carbohydrate molecules in the stomach, limiting the amount of active sites on these molecules for enzymes to attack once it reaches the small intestine. This allows for starchy carbohydrates to pass through the small intestine without being absorbed too quickly and decreases the risk for high glycemic responses. Examples of fat and protein sources in the Mediterranean diet are olive oil, salmon, chickpeas, or black beans. These foods are good to pair with carbohydrates in the attempt to reduce high glycemic responses. As with all diets, there are negatives that need to be addressed. Not one single diet is a one-size-fits-all diet. That includes the Mediterranean diet. Although red wine is a part of the Mediterranean diet, consuming red wine can cause mild cases of hypoglycemia because the body will metabolize alcohol first before metabolizing any macronutrient. People who take sodium glucose inhibitor medications to control blood glucose levels should avoid consuming red wine or any kind of alcohol that can lower blood sugar. The reason for this is because sodium glucose inhibitor medications enhance urinary glucose excretion instead of glucose being absorbed in the bloodstream, which helps manage healthier blood glucose levels. Drinking red wine would induce even lower blood glucose levels, risking the event of hypoglycemia to occur. Other negatives that follow a Mediterranean diet is the higher risk for allergies. People who have multiple common food allergies, like tree nuts, peanuts, shellfish, or gluten, might have a harder time following this particular plant-based diet pattern. Following the everything in moderation rules and avoiding processed foods that might follow the Mediterranean diet might be difficult for some people, depending on the other lifestyle factors like income and whether a person lives in a food desert area. With that said, diabetes continues to be a leading cause of death in the U.S. and worldwide, and the prevalence of cases continues to rise daily. It is very important to continue to encourage healthful ways in managing blood glucose levels in both diabetics and pre-diabetics, starting with nutrition management. Introducing the Mediterranean diet is a great way in helping diabetics manage their blood sugar levels and reduce their risk for other diseases or conditions that diabetes becomes the precursor of. Other ways that nutrition management goes hand in hand with is regular physical activity and regular sleep patterns, which help improve macronutrient metabolism and insulin sensitivity. Here is a list of local resources that you or your loved ones who suffer from type 2 diabetes can access to get started on their blood sugar management journey today. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and share this video and ask any questions in the comments below. Thank you.